It started as a strange gift. Jake found it on his doorstep one morning, wrapped in plain brown paper. No note, no return address. Just a package sitting there, waiting for him. Have you ever received something unexpected and felt a chill run down your spine? That's how Jake felt. Curiosity got the better of him, and he brought the package inside. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing an antique clock. It was beautiful but eerie, made of dark wood with intricate carvings that seemed to twist and turn the longer he looked at them. The face of the clock was pristine, with golden hands that gleamed in the light. But what caught his attention was the countdown timer at the bottom. It wasn't moving. It was stuck at exactly 72 hours, 72 hours. Jake thought it might be a prank from one of his friends. Who else would leave something like this? He shrugged it off and placed the clock on his living room shelf. It didn't seem to be working, and the timer wasn't counting down, so he decided to ignore it. But that night, as he lay in bed, he heard a faint ticking sound. It was slow and deliberate, like the beating of a heart. He got up to check, his pulse quickening. The sound led him back to the clock. The hands had moved, and the timer was now at 71 hours, 59 minutes, and 45 seconds. It was counting down. Jake's stomach tightened. Was it broken? He hadn't seen the hands move before, but now they were shifting steadily. He turned the clock around, looking for a way to stop it. There was no wind-up key, no visible mechanism. Just the smooth, polished wood and those unnerving carvings. He thought about throwing it out, but something held him back. It wasn't just the beauty of the clock, it felt important, as if getting rid of it would be a mistake. The next morning, Jake woke up to find the clock's timer at 65 hours, 20 minutes, and 10 seconds. The ticking had grown louder, echoing faintly throughout the house. He decided to show it to his best friend, Mark. Mark was into weird antiques and might know something about it. When Mark saw the clock, he frowned. "Where did you get this?" he asked, running his fingers over the carvings. "It was on my doorstep," Jake replied. "Do you think it's cursed or something?" He laughed, but it sounded forced. Mark didn't laugh. "I don't know, but these carvings, they look familiar. Give me a day or two. I'll ask around." Jake left the clock with Mark, hoping to put it out of his mind. But that night, his phone rang. It was Mark, his voice shaking. "Jake, you need to come over," he said. "Now." When Jake arrived, Mark's face was pale. The clock sat on his table, its timer now at 48 hours. "I asked some people about it," Mark said. "They told me stories. There are rumors about a clock like this. It counts down to something terrible. Nobody knows what happens when it reaches zero, because nobody survives to tell." Jake's throat went dry. "What do you mean, nobody survives?" Mark shook his head. "Accidents, disappearances, deaths. They say it's cursed. And the worst part? Once the clock chooses you, there's no escaping it." Jake wanted to laugh, to call it ridiculous, but deep down, he felt the weight of Mark's words. He took the clock back home, unsure of what else to do. He considered smashing it, but something told him that wouldn't work. Instead, he placed it back on the shelf and stared at it for hours, watching the timer tick down. By the next day, the timer was at midnight. The ticking was louder now, filling the house with its relentless rhythm. Jake couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he dreamed of the clock. In his dreams, it was massive, towering over him, its hands spinning wildly as shadows swirled around it. Have you ever had a dream so vivid it felt real? Desperate for answers, Jake searched online, looking for anything about cursed clocks or countdowns. He found stories, scattered and vague, about people who had received similar clocks. None of them ended well. One story spoke of a man who tried to destroy the clock, only to be found days later, lifeless, with the clock ticking beside him, unscathed. The timer was at 12 hours when strange things started happening. Lights flickered, shadows moved where they shouldn't, and the air felt heavy, almost suffocating. Jake's phone rang constantly, but when he answered, there was only static. He felt like he was being watched, though he was alone. When the timer hit 6 hours, Jake decided he couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed the clock and drove to the nearest lake. He hurled it into the water, watching as it sank beneath the surface. For the first time in days, he felt a sense of relief. But when he returned home, the clock was back on his shelf, the timer at 5 hours 59 minutes and 50 seconds. Jake's hand shook as he stared at it. The clock wasn't just counting down, it was toying with him. He called Mark, but there was no answer. He drove to Mark's house, only to find the place dark and empty. Something had happened to him, Jake was sure of it. The timer hit 3 hours, and Jake's fear turned to anger. He screamed at the clock, demanding to know what it wanted. To his shock, the carvings began to move, twisting and writhing like living things. Words appeared on the clock face, glowing faintly, "Your time is almost up." Jake's heart raced. He tried to leave the house, but the doors wouldn't open. The windows wouldn't break. He was trapped. The clock's ticking grew louder, almost deafening, as the timer hit 1 hour. Have you ever felt completely helpless, like no matter what you do, you're doomed? That's how Jake felt as he watched the final hour tick away. The room grew darker, the air colder. Shadows pulled around the clock, creeping toward him like living things. When the timer hit 10 seconds, the room was pitch black, except for the glow of the clock. Jake could hear whispers now, faint and incomprehensible, growing louder with each passing second. The shadows closed in, wrapping around him like a suffocating blanket. 5 seconds, Jake's vision blurred, and his body felt heavy. He tried to move, to scream, but he couldn't. 2 seconds, the whispers turned into a roar, a cacophony of voices speaking in unison. Your time is up. Midnight, the clock stopped. The ticking ceased. And Jake was gone. The next morning, a package appeared on another doorstep, wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside was an antique clock, its timer set to 72 hours. Have you ever wondered what you would do if you found a mysterious package on your doorstep? Would you open it? Or would you leave it alone? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe for more tales that will keep you up at night. And remember, some things are better left